Actually, the first show that I played was the Ohio State Fair with about 20,000 people, you know, and I was extremely frightened.
He was born into a script someone else had already written. On May 8, 1940, Eric Hilliard Nelson entered the world in Teaneck, New Jersey, tiny, fragile, asthmatic, unaware that his life would never belong to him. Before he could crawl, his name had already been rehearsed into microphones, printed on cue cards, and stitched into studio contracts. His father, Ozzie Nelson, carried the swagger of a former bandleader with a baton in one hand and a vision of empire in the other. His mother, Harriet Hilliard, had spent years performing under bright vaudeville lights and smiling through film reels long before Ricky ever learned to stand. Their world was built on performance, and their son would become its centerpiece, whether he wanted to or not. The Nelsons didn't just chase fame, they engineered it. Their home wasn't the warm sanctuary America imagined, it was a functioning studio, a controlled environment where every line, laugh, and pause could be rehearsed, refined, monetized. By October 1944, the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet transformed their family into America's first sitcom royalty. But behind the perfectly framed living room and gentle comedic timing, Ricky grew up in a place that pulsed with rehearsals, lighting checks, and marked up scripts instead of bedtime stories and scraped knees. Millions believed they knew the Nelsons. Yet the wide smiles hid a truth far colder: the show came first. Always. Even before preschool, Harriet trained Ricky like a miniature stage performer. She taught him to control his breathing between verses, to hit notes cleanly, to stand tall even when his small legs trembled. She adjusted his posture, corrected his diction, and reminded him to smile even when he wanted to cry. Real school could wait, perfect pitch could not. Childhood could wait, performances could not. While other toddlers stumbled through finger painting and nursery rhymes, Ricky practiced scales until his throat ached. He never asked to become a performer, he was raised like a product polished for a showroom window. The world thought he was gifted. The truth was simpler and sadder: he was conditioned. Harriet wasn't cruel, not intentionally. She believed she was shaping him for greatness, preparing him for a future that she and Ozzie had already decided for him. In their eyes, Ricky wasn't just their son, he was the missing piece of a family dynasty, the final ingredient that would make the Nelsons unforgettable. Harriet cleaned his face before rehearsals the way jewelers polish diamonds, ensuring not a speck of imperfection would dull the glow America expected. She dressed him in clothes chosen for how they looked on camera, not for how they felt on his body. She rehearsed his lines, his smiles, even his surprise reactions. Everything he did was rehearsed twice, once for practice, once for perfection. There were moments, small, fragile moments, when Ricky tried to show who he really was. When his voice cracked from exhaustion, Harriet told him to try again, but softer this time. When he wanted to play outside, Ozzie reminded him that the world didn't stop for childhood. When he cried after a long day of rehearsal, his tears were dismissed as nerves he would grow out of. And he did grow out of them, not because he stopped feeling overwhelmed, but because he learned to hide it better. The conditioning worked. By the time he reached the set of The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, he performed with an ease that made audiences fall in love instantly. They didn't know that behind his natural charm was a child trained to anticipate approval like oxygen. They didn't see the pressure, the fear, the silent calculation behind every smile. Ricky Nelson's talent wasn't born, it was built. Brick by brick, lesson by lesson, expectation by expectation. And like all structures built under immense pressure, cracks had already begun to form long before the world ever saw the finished product. He wasn't just performing on camera, he was performing his entire life. By the time he appeared on television, he was thin, quiet, sickly. Asthma kept him in bed more than recess ever would have. He watched life pass him by from behind studio lights and parental expectations. But when Ricky and his older brother David finally played themselves on air in 1949, audiences didn't see the frail, anxious kid hiding behind a forced smile. They saw a natural. A boy who fit perfectly into the idealized American dream. A boy who felt like sunshine, innocence, and comfort. That image would define him long before he ever discovered who he actually was. At 9 years old, Ricky was already making $200 per episode, roughly $2,500 today. But none of it reached him. Not a single dollar. Ozzy controlled every cent, treating his son's income as a family asset rather than a child's earnings. Ricky's allowance barely covered snacks at the corner store. America adored him, yet he was the only kid on set searching couch cushions for spare change. By 16, he had generated $500,000, equivalent to more than $5.7 million today. Yet the financial cage remained shut. When he turned 18, he was hit with a staggering 93% tax rate, yet still sometimes couldn't afford movie tickets. Fame had made him a millionaire, but family had made him financially powerless. The shift to television made Ricky a national face, but not a free one. He couldn't simply walk down the street. He couldn't attend school dances or hang out with friends without permission. Ozzy monitored everything, reminding him, "The family is your world." And Ricky believed him. He had been raised inside a controlled orbit, and the idea of stepping outside it felt dangerous, unthinkable. Slowly, silently, Ricky began to withdraw. Behind the smooth on-screen charm was a boy quietly drowning. He suffered panic attacks before shoots, motion sickness during travel, and exhaustion from long filming days and relentless publicity demands. Commercial shoots pushed him harder. Photo sessions required forced laughter. Wheaties ads demanded energy he didn't have. The moment cameras cut, he collapsed backstage, gasping for breath. Crew members hid vaporizers just out of frame to soothe his asthma, desperate to keep him camera ready. The world adored him. The world consumed him. But nobody noticed him, and then, music happened. In 1956, when Ricky watched Elvis Presley electrify the Ed Sullivan Show, something cracked open inside him. For the first time, he saw a kind of freedom he'd never known. A stage not controlled by scripts. A voice not shaped by parents. A life not dictated by producers. He begged for a chance to make music, his music. In 1957, he recorded "I'm Walkin'" and "A Teenager's Romance." The reaction was volcanic. Teens lost their minds, and suddenly the boy raised in a cage found an escape route. By summer, Imperial Records signed him, offering rare creative control for a teenage artist, something unheard of in the era. Ricky wasn't just singing, he was steering. Hit after hit followed like a heartbeat refusing to slow. "Bebop Baby," "Stood Up," "Poor Little Fool," and more. When "Poor Little Fool" became the first ever #1 song on Billboard's newly created Hot 100, Ricky was cemented as a music icon, yet still underestimated as an artist. Crowds flooded concert halls. Teenage hysteria reached levels so chaotic that police had to intervene to control the stampede. Reporters compared his impact to Elvis. And yet the boy behind the spotlight was still just that, a boy searching for a way to breathe. Hollywood noticed the frenzy. In 1952, he starred in "Here Come the Nelsons," then followed with "The Wish Book," and his breakout film "Rio Bravo" in 1959 alongside legends John Wayne and Dean Martin. Critics approached with skepticism but walked away stunned. Ricky could act. He had depth, subtlety, presence. But Hollywood didn't care. They wanted the wholesome teen idol, the cute boy from the sitcom. He was typecast, boxed in, denied the darker, more complex roles he craved. Talent wasn't the barrier. Image was. By the late 1960s, when teen idol nostalgia grew stale, the world expected Ricky to fade gracefully into irrelevance. Instead, he reinvented himself. Long before country rock took mainstream form, Ricky formed the Stone Canyon Band, defying the pop persona forced upon him and creating a raw, honest sound that mixed rock with country in a way few artists dared. Their live album carried grit and soul. His rendition of Bob Dylan's "She Belongs to Me" revived interest in his artistry and proved he wasn't a relic, he was evolving. Musicians noticed. Randy Meisner, who would later co-found the Eagles, credited Ricky as a defining early influence. Ricky wasn't following trends. He was quietly building one. But reinvention came with backlash. In 1971, at Madison Square Garden, Ricky walked on stage with longer hair and modern clothes, confident, refreshed, ready to share his new sound. But the crowd didn't see growth. They saw betrayal. They booed him. Jeered him. Some wanted the clean-cut 1950s version and nothing more. Ricky walked off the stage shaken, humiliated. Yet from that pain came his most powerful creative moment. He wrote Garden Party, a soft yet defiant anthem carrying a truth he could no longer suppress: you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself. It wasn't just a song, it was closure. The 1970s and early 1980s were unforgiving. Record labels shifted. Trends evolved. Radio playlists embraced new voices. Ricky found himself caught in the cracks between eras. Too modern for the nostalgia crowd, too tied to the past for younger listeners. TV appearances allowed him to stay visible, but rarely relevant. It wasn't that his music lost quality, the world simply moved on without him. Fame had a new generation. And the spotlight that once chased him now barely noticed when he entered a room. Still, Ricky pushed forward. Touring small venues, performing for loyal fans, sometimes playing in half-filled halls just to keep the music alive. He refused to surrender. He didn't know how to live without performing, it was all he'd ever been allowed to do. Behind the scenes, his life grew complicated. Financial stress, relationship tension, the emotional toll of decades of pressure, and the ache of realizing his career would never return to its former heights, all of it weighed heavily, yet even through the struggles, there was a strange sense of peace. For once, he was making his own choices. He didn't owe anyone a perfect image anymore. He wasn't the golden boy. He wasn't the teen idol. He wasn't America's sweetheart. He was simply Rick Nelson, a man who loved music more than the fame that came attached to it, but fate had its own script. On December 31, 1985, Ricky Nelson boarded a plane for a New Year's Eve performance that was meant to bring in the next chapter of his life. Instead, it became the final one. The aircraft crashed near DeKalb, Texas, killing Ricky and 6 others. The news stunned the world. Headlines focused on the crash, the mystery, the speculation. Rumors swirled. Controversies erupted. Investigators examined everything from mechanical failures to whispered allegations. But amid the noise, one truth cut deeper than any theory. Ricky had spent his entire life trying to escape an identity he never chose, and in the silent darkness of that plane cabin, he finally escaped everything: the cameras, the expectations, the contracts, the childhood stolen from him before he ever knew he had won. The world mourned an icon. But the real tragedy wasn't how Ricky Nelson died. It was how little of his life ever belonged to him. And when the wreckage cleared, when the smoke faded, when America moved on, one haunting truth remained: the boy the world adored, the star millions worshipped, the man who kept reinventing himself to stay alive in an industry that demanded perfection, he had been disappearing long before the crash. Long before the fire. Long before investigators combed the charred remains of a plane that should have carried him into a new year, not into history, because Ricky Nelson didn't simply fall from the sky. He had been falling, slowly, silently, for decades. Every stage he ever stepped on was built by someone else. Every script he ever read was written before he knew how to read. Every note he sang, every smile he offered, every perfectly timed joke delivered on television wasn't an expression of who he was, it was compliance. The performance was never optional. He had been trained to give the world what it wanted, even when it cost him everything he needed. As a child, he disappeared behind the bright lights of a family empire. As a teenager, he vanished beneath the screams of fans who didn't care about his fears, only about his face. As a young man, he sank under the weight of contracts that treated him like a commodity instead of a son. And as he grew older, he faded into an industry that valued him only when he fit into the narrow box it had built. Every reinvention was a rescue attempt. Every new sound was a lifeline thrown back into the raging sea of expectations. By the time he reached adulthood, Ricky wasn't living a life, he was maintaining a myth. A myth of perfection. A myth of happiness. A myth of a wholesome American dream that had never actually belonged to him. Fans remembered the boy next door. They remembered the golden-haired teenager with the gentle smile. They remembered the idol. But they never met the man. Even in his later years, long after the hysteria faded, Ricky still carried the weight of the role he had been assigned at birth. He played smaller shows, toured with dedication, and poured himself into music that meant more than the fame it once brought. But the world that claimed to love him had already turned its attention elsewhere. He was present, but fading. Visible, but overlooked. Alive, but disappearing. So when the plane went down, the world gasped in shock. Headlines exploded. Documentaries aired. Rumors spread like wildfire. People mourned the icon as if they had lost someone they knew personally. But they didn't know him. They only knew the version of him that Ozzy engineered, that Harriet perfected, that America consumed. The real Ricky had slipped away long before any engine failed, long before any emergency call, long before flames lit up a dark Texas sky. In death, he finally escaped the role that had imprisoned him in life. No more scripts. No more expectations. No more masks. Just silence, finally his own. And that is the true tragedy. America didn't just lose Ricky Nelson on December 31st, 1985. It lost him long before the crash, long before the fire, long before the wreckage. The world lost him the moment it demanded he be perfect. The moment it loved the character more than the child. Fame didn't destroy Ricky Nelson. A plane didn't destroy Ricky Nelson.